This is not how I wanted the world to meet my son, but here we are.
The night of July 4th, 2026, Christine Wansley's phone rang at 11:07 p.m. It was one of Nolan's friends. A boy who had been on that boat. A boy who had made it home. Nolan hadn't. She didn't wait. In the early hours of July 5th, she was already posting desperate appeals on Facebook. Nolan is still missing. Please, if you're a praying person, please pray he is found alive, safe, and unharmed. Then she did something else. Something small. Something that, days later, would become one of the most talked about details in this entire case. She opened Life 360, a location tracking app, and searched for her son's phone. The location it showed wasn't Horn Island. It showed his phone was already back on land. But Nolan wasn't. That detail, a phone that traveled home without its owner, is where this story really begins. And if you've been following this case, I think you already know there is a lot more underneath it. Authorities said from early on they do not currently suspect foul play. There is no information that we have right now, Sheriff John Ledbetter said, that would lead us to believe that a crime has occurred. But Nolan's parents don't accept that. His community doesn't accept that. And as of this week, a growing number of people across the country are asking the same questions his mother has been asking since the night she tracked that phone to someone else's house. What actually happened to Nolan Wells?
It was his last weekend to have fun because that Monday he had to report to school. We was preparing to take him back for camp to prepare for the season. So, we're gonna see. He wanted to have his last hurrah before he locked down.
Nolan Xavier Wells grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a small Gulf Coast city of about 19,000 people where everybody, it seems, knew his name. His high school coach released a statement saying Wells was an outstanding young man and the kind of son, teammate, friend, and student every coach hopes to have. That reputation followed him everywhere. His mother Christine described him as a special soul who was always willing to cheer and uplift others. She said, God took his time creating our son. He was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, preparing to return for the coming football season. He would have turned 19 next month. The night before the 4th of July, Nolan was home. He cooked dinner for his parents, then packed up to head to a friend's house where he'd be spending the night before the trip. On his way out the door, he said, "Hey Mom, I'm about to go, I love you," then gave her a kiss and a hug. That was the last time Christine Wansley heard her son's voice. The next morning, Nolan and his friends made their way to a private dock in the Ocean Springs area. They boarded a boat and headed out toward Horn Island. And here is a detail most people have heard in passing but haven't really sat with. Nolan was the only African American in that group of friends. They were mostly white. They all came back. He didn't. Now, that fact alone does not tell us what happened. But it is the lens through which Nolan's family, his attorneys, and a nation have been watching this investigation unfold. And it's worth understanding why.
Investigation, how will that differ from what the authorities are doing?
Well, one thing, we're trying to be very transparent because the family has some concerns about the state of Mississippi doing an investigation of the death of a young black.
Horn Island is not easy to reach. It's the largest of the Mississippi-Alabama barrier islands, a designated wilderness area about 4.2 square miles of white sand dunes, sea oat groves, and pine trees. There are no utilities, no commercial ferry service, no facilities. Only a small ranger station near its center. You get there by private boat, and that's it. It was also, on July 4th, 2026, absolutely packed. The island is known as the spot for teens and young adults during summer months precisely because it's away from adult supervision. Underage drinking is common. Friend groups merge into larger groups in ways that don't happen as easily at Gulf Coast house parties, which tend to get shut down when they grow too large. Photos and videos from that day show multiple boats docked at the island, young adults wading in water reaching below their shoulders, drinking beer and spiked seltzers. Nolan arrived with his friends. He was wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. The day wore on. At some point in the early afternoon, his friends began preparing to head back. According to Josh Gill, commander of the United Cajun Navy Volunteer Organization, Wells reportedly wanted to stay on the island to talk with a girl. His friends said he planned to get a ride back to the mainland with another boat. The mother of one of the boys on the boat, Ashley Cole, confirmed her son said Nolan chose to stay, and that the boys left early because the boat had started taking in water. That's the official account. His friends left. Nolan stayed. Witnesses told authorities Wells was last seen near the island around 3 p.m. And then, nothing. No confirmed sightings after 3 p.m. No photos. No videos. No eyewitnesses who can account for where Nolan was or what he was doing in the hours that followed. The northwest tip of Horn Island, where people like to visit because the beach is nice and the water is clear, is also known for strong rip currents. Brian Troshers, National Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, confirmed the rip current was particularly strong on July 4th. There are rip currents even the strongest swimmers can't break out of, Troshers said. But that's harder to settle on as the complete answer. Troshers himself noted, there were so many people around that somebody would have noticed a distressed swimmer. With so many sets of eyeballs, you would think with just scanning around, you would see someone with their hands up in the air. A beach packed with boats and people. Dozens of witnesses. And nobody saw anything. When Nolan didn't come home, his mother filed a missing persons report. The following day, multiple agencies launched a search. 2 sheriff's offices, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the U.S. Coast Guard, the National Park Service, and the United Cajun Navy, scanning the island by boat and aircraft. On Monday morning, around 8:45 a.m., a U.S. park ranger found Wells' body off the northwest part of the island. He was later identified through dental records, used when other methods like fingerprints or DNA are not available. And as painful as that confirmation was, the questions that followed were even harder to sit with. Because investigators had now publicly said they were looking for something very specific. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office asked the public for original, unedited photos and videos taken on the northwest tip of Horn Island, specifically those depicting alleged altercations or containing images of, or believed to include, Nolan Wells. They also asked anyone who observed or heard an argument, disturbance, or other unusual activity to come forward. So the question becomes obvious. If this was simply a tragic accident on a holiday weekend, why are investigators specifically asking for footage of an argument?
Friend Toshima, and I said, hey, have you guys seen Nolan? Because her 2 sons, Jalen and Javon, like, they grew up together.
Let's start with what is confirmed. Attorney Ben Crump cited a video in which a male voice can be heard saying, "Give me my freaking phone, what are you doing?" Crump's legal team believes that voice belongs to Nolan. Mississippi Today has reviewed this video. It was taken from a boat, panning to show other boats parked nearby and a sandbar where people stood and waited. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has not confirmed the existence of a fight on the island, but they did ask anyone with video of an alleged altercation to come forward. What is disputed? Whether the voice in that video is Nolan's, whether the argument shown has any connection to his disappearance, and whether there is additional footage that hasn't surfaced yet. What remains unanswered? Who was involved in that exchange, what happened immediately after it, and whether any investigation has yet definitively linked that footage to Nolan's final hours. There are people who were on that island who know things. That's not speculation, that's exactly what the sheriff's office has said publicly when they asked them to come forward. And they haven't yet. At least not publicly. Think about what you would do if you saw something that day and you're watching this right now. What would it take for you to speak? This is the part of the story that hollowed out a lot of people who heard it for the first time. Christine Wansley said she checked Nolan's Life 360 location and it showed something completely different than Snapchat did. It showed his phone was back on land. She tracked the phone to one of Nolan's friends' houses. A friend of hers went to retrieve it. There were issues getting the phone back. Christine had to call and identify herself as Nolan's mother, explain that they were trying to find him before the phone was returned. Sharpton noted that Wells' friends did not voluntarily tell authorities they had his phone and keys when they left him on the island. Once Christine had the phone, she and her sister went through it together. She found nothing. No photos. No videos. No saved snaps from that day. He had 2 accounts. Absolutely nothing. It wasn't even 24 hours, which is how long pictures and videos stay on Snapchat, she said. Christine found it suspicious because her son was known to document everything. She knew he would especially be recording and posting on the 4th of July. There was nothing. No saved videos. And even my sister was like, yeah, that's suspicious. Snapchat's corporate spokesperson told CBS News, "Our hearts go out to the family affected by this tragic incident. A critical part of our efforts to help keep our community safe includes our long-standing and crucial engagement with law enforcement, and we stand ready to work with them to investigate this tragedy." Now, it is documented that Snapchat content disappears after 24 hours under normal circumstances. That's built into the platform. But Christine's point was that Nolan saved his content. That's what he did. The fact that nothing was saved on a holiday he would have been documenting is what his family says doesn't fit. Crump put it plainly, what teenager would leave their phone behind if they're going to stay on this island? That question doesn't have a clean answer.
And we're all going to college together, most of us, so it's just truly a blessing to be.
Nolan was such a great person. He was just a happy young man that made everybody smile and just made your day brighter.
He was liked by all. It was not a friend he couldn't.
The phone wasn't the only thing Nolan's friends left the island with. His cell phone and keys were both in the possession of one of the people he was with on the island when they returned to the mainland. Elmore Wansley says he encountered similar resistance when he went to retrieve Nolan's keys and his car, which had been left parked at a friend's driveway. Nolan's father told CBS Mornings, "If you be with me, you come back with me." He raised him that way. His father said he does not believe his son made a voluntary decision to stay behind on that island. I don't believe he decided to stay on the island by himself. It just doesn't. That's not his character. What is publicly confirmed? The phone and keys left with the friends. What remains unanswered, at what point during the day that happened, and whether those items were discussed with investigators before or only after the family began asking questions. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed
That we cannot answer.
that around 11 p.m. on the night of July 4th, they received a call from one of Nolan's friends. However, the Coast Guard stated it did not require Coast Guard assistance and would not disclose further details about that call. Christine Wansley said that when she began contacting law enforcement, there was back and forth between different agencies due to jurisdiction confusion. Horn Island sits out in the Mississippi Sound, and it wasn't immediately clear which agency was responsible. Later that night, Christine and her husband met a deputy in a McDonald's parking lot to tell them everything they knew. A McDonald's parking lot. On the night their son was missing. Crump later raised a question publicly. Why didn't his body wash up with the tide on Sunday? Why didn't it come on Monday? He was not asserting an answer. He was flagging the timeline as something the family found confusing. The sheriff's office has not offered a public explanation for the body's location or the timing of its discovery. The investigation into those questions remains active. Every case like this exists inside a larger context. And in Mississippi, that context is not abstract. Crump told NBC News, "You had this 18-year-old kid who went out celebrating on the 4th of July with his friends on a boat, and tragically, they all came back. But Nolan didn't, and Nolan was the only African American in the group. And so it's like making people hearken back to the sins of the past in the state of Mississippi. The history of Mississippi is something they don't just read about in books," Crump said. "It's a lived experience for many Black Americans." Sharpton opened the Harlem press conference by saying simply, "What we've been told does not make sense. The sheriff's office has not been accused of misconduct. Sheriff Ledbetter has stated the investigation is active and ongoing. But the family's legal team has said clearly they do not trust the local investigation to be sufficient." Local resident Dylan Johnson Whitfield, who knew Nolan from rival high school football teams, said he's noticed a shift in his community. Even quiet people have started speaking out about the need for transparency. He also noted that many young people who were at Horn Island that day are afraid to speak up, afraid of being investigated themselves, or thrust into the media spotlight. That fear of speaking is its own kind of answer to a question no one is openly asking yet. What do you do with information that puts you in the center of something this large? The family had been waiting for answers from Mississippi. By Thursday, they decided they couldn't wait any longer. Nolan's body was flown to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy. The family wanted to ensure a doctor with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement conducted the examination. Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL quarterback and civil rights activist, personally funded the independent autopsy. Tyler Perry is covering the funeral costs. Filmmaker Spike Lee attended the Harlem press conference in a show of support. That press conference was held on Friday afternoon at the National Action Network's House of Justice in Harlem, New York, the headquarters of Reverend Al Sharpton's organization. What unfolded in that room was something most people covering this case had not fully anticipated. Christine Wansley, who had asked for privacy while grieving just days before, stood up and spoke. Her voice broke. "We just want to know," she said. "We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home. We want it to be an honest, thorough investigation. That's all we're asking for." Elmore Wansley, Nolan's father, stood beside her. He told GMA's Michael Strahan he couldn't fathom why his son would have separated from the group. And then Crump said something that reframed the entire case. "If the roles were reversed," he said, "and you had 3 young black men on a boat with a young white man, and that young white man ended up dead, what investigation would be conducted? How many times would those 3 young black men be interrogated? All we're asking is the same consideration you would give if the roles were reversed." That question is not a legal argument. It's not a declaration of guilt. It's a mirror. And it's the kind of question that doesn't go away no matter how many times you try to set it aside. The independent autopsy results were expected at that press conference. They weren't there. Due to challenges getting Nolan's body on a flight to Washington earlier in the week, the results had been delayed. Crump said they will make an announcement as soon as results are received. That means as of this recording, the cause of Nolan Wells' death has not been officially determined. Not by the state. Not by the independent examiner. The full picture is still being assembled. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has not responded to multiple press inquiries. The investigation is classified as a death, not a homicide. That classification matters. It shapes what resources are applied, what legal standards govern the evidence, and what conclusions investigators are even looking for. The family's attorneys believe that classification is premature. If there are people who watched this story develop over the last week and felt something wasn't sitting right, they're in the same place as Nolan's parents right now. Waiting. And the people who were on that island are somewhere in that waiting too. If you know something, if you recorded something, saw something, heard something that day on Horn Island, this is exactly the kind of case where that information genuinely changes what happens next. A state autopsy has been completed. Its results, including toxicology, have not been publicly released and may take additional weeks. Once Crump's team receives the independent autopsy results, they will make an announcement. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still asking the public for unedited footage from Horn Island on July 4th. That appeal remains open. Crump's team currently has Nolan's phone and says they will turn it over to Mississippi investigators once their own review is complete. Reverend Sharpton said the funeral will be planned to seek unity and extol what this young man represented. He said, "We want everybody, black, white, everybody to come." Christine Wansley told supporters who had been organizing protests in Ocean Springs to remain peaceful. She said, "Think about what Nolan would want. And I'm telling you, he wouldn't want that kind of behavior." She described her son as a peacemaker whose smile was infectious. That detail, a mother in the middle of her grief asking people to honor her son's character, is one of the most quietly devastating things about this entire story. She knew who he was. She's the one who has to reconcile who he was with what happened to him. And she still doesn't have an answer. There is a version of this story where all the unanswered questions eventually resolve. Where the autopsy results explain the cause of death clearly. Where investigators identify the video, account for the timeline, and close the case with documentation the family can believe in. That version hasn't arrived yet. And the reason so many people are still talking about Nolan Wells, The reason this case has grown from a local tragedy into a national conversation isn't because everyone has decided what happened. It's because the questions themselves refuse to feel small. A phone that came home without its owner. Snapchat content that wasn't there. Keys the family had to ask for. A timeline with gaps that the people who were present haven't filled. An argument caught on video that investigators themselves want to see the original of. A young man who, by every account, always stayed with his group. And a mother and father who, on the worst week of their lives, flew to New York and stood in front of cameras and said, "We are not accepting this. We are fighting. We are not done. We are in a ferocious pursuit for the truth," Crump said. That pursuit is still ongoing. If you've been following this story and you want it to reach the people who need to hear it, the ones who were on that island, the ones sitting on footage or a conversation or a memory from that day, then this is exactly the kind of story that spreads person to person, comment to comment, share to share, until the right person sees it. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He cooked dinner for his parents the night before he left. He played wide receiver. He had a smile that people who knew him still reach for when they try to explain who he was. His family says their search isn't over. Maybe the final answers are still coming. Maybe they'll arrive with the autopsy results. Maybe they'll come from someone who was on Horn Island and hasn't spoken yet. But until every credible question in this case has been examined, completely, transparently, and on the record, Nolan's parents have made one thing clear. They will keep asking.